Hi, I'm Tina Swithin, author of Divorcing a Narcissist and founder of One Mom's Battle. And today I am wanting to talk about child support. In the beginning of a relationship, the narcissist really tries to convince us that they are special, they're unique, they're different. But what I have found over the years is if you really scrub it down, they're truly all the same. Different variations, but a lot of them share the same qualities, triggers, buttons. And one of the biggest buttons you can find is money. In the beginning of my relationship and throughout my marriage, I was one who typically worked anywhere between 40 and sometimes 90 hours a week, depending on what was going on with our business and or my job at times. But I've always had a really, really strong work ethic. And so it was difficult for me when our divorce started and he was painting me to the court to be someone who basically sat on the couch and ate bonbons all day while watching Dr. Phil or Jerry Springer. And I didn't even recognize who was being described because while I'm not perfect, one thing I do pride myself on is an incredibly strong work ethic. According to my ex-husband, in our court paperwork, I deserved nothing. And it didn't matter that I had two very young children depending on me. He really believed that everything was his and nothing was mine, which was really ironic given that we both went into the marriage without marital assets and were both fairly young in our careers. I came to discover pretty quickly in the divorce process that my ex-husband would have derived a sick, twisted pleasure if he would have stumbled upon me eating dinner from a dumpster. He truly had no ability to feel compassion or to see my side of it, because that is unfortunately one of the characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder. And for him, it was all about winning and hurting me. And he knew that financially, our business, I was very dependent on our businesses. So he really used finances as a weapon to hurt, control, and destroy me in a lot of ways. It is important to understand that regardless of your ex-husband's socioeconomical background, whether he's a doctor or drives a garbage truck, his trigger and button is going to be money and child support and spousal support and assets. Thankfully, I did learn this very early on, and I understand there is a reality to making the decision to step back and allow child support services or your local agency to take control of the situation. The reality is you have to feed your kids and you have to keep a roof over their heads. And I do understand all of those things. But I also understood pretty quickly that if I went after support, he in turn went after my kids. I picked up on that concept pretty quickly, thank God. Because it was truly my reality, and it's the reality of so many others. When my marriage ended in 2009, I had no job. I had a car that was slated for repossession. I had less than $200 to my name and a lot of debt. Unfortunately, because of my ex-husband's financial abuse, we were forced to file bankruptcy at the end of our marriage. So on top of all of those things, I also had no credit. And I can tell you what a humbling experience that was to visit the local resources or food banks where I had actually volunteered my time over the years. And truly the most humbling experience of my life. So wherever you are in this process, I truly understand. And my goal is to provide a general overview of the topic and the reality of divorcing a narcissist and finances, but by all means, I have been in survival mode. I understand that you could be very dependent on support right now, because I was in the beginning. So, take my words as an overall picture as you learn to navigate this world. So on top of a very desperate financial picture, which I was facing, I had two very young daughters who were looking to me and needed me to protect them and to provide from them. It took me a while to regain my footing. It started with an entry-level job that I was able to do from home, and I slowly worked my way up. In the beginning, that job did not even cover the cost of my daughter's preschool or daycare costs, and it was very difficult. I went to churches to try to come up with money for a deposit. I had to have family members co-sign for my utilities. It was a truly dark time for me, but as I regained my footing, as I began to understand and educate myself, I also began to take my power back. And there's a lot to be said for that. Knowledge truly is power, and you have to equip yourself for this battle by educating yourself on all topics. The reality was my ex-husband wanted to see me fail. And as much as he hated paying support, he liked the power that he had over me during those times. And it was my goal to take my power back and to, not be completely dependent on him. I remember just being on an absolute roller coaster. He would lose jobs and wouldn't tell me, and I would take my kids to doctors, and then I would wind up with huge medical bills because, come to find out, we weren't covered because he had been fired the month before. Or at a time when I was desperate for his support to help pay my rent, I also found out he had been fired from a job. So he kept me on puppet strings, and I didn't want to be in that place anymore. One thing I learned that I feel many people struggle with is that my lifestyle during my marriage was not going to continue after my divorce. And I had grown up in a very impoverished, difficult upbringing, so it wasn't the first rodeo for me. I knew that no matter what, I was going to be okay. So the facade that we had built during our marriage of the big fancy house in the gated community and the luxury vehicles and the live-in nanny, that was no longer my life. I was truly ground zero. I was living in an apartment building with a bunch of college students, and that was okay. It was where I was supposed to be at the time. I knew it wasn't forever, and that it was very temporary. My reality was that I had my kids, and that is what mattered to me. My ex-husband lives in a mansion in the Bay Area of California, which is one of the most expensive places to live. The rent on his house is $18,000 a month. He drives luxury cars, he pays cash for them, he travels all over the world. My daughters and I just got a passport for the first time in our lives. So we live very different lives. And, there's a part of me who thinks this isn't fair and I want to hold him accountable. But the reality is I have something that is worth so much more, and that is my children. And their safety and their happiness and my relationship with them. And that is something that money cannot buy. For me, it was important to really get a different vantage point and look at this from a different angle. The amount of time, energy, and money that I was spending to try to hold him accountable was taking a toll on my livelihood, on my health. I have an autoimmune disease, and I knew that stress wasn't good for me. And I decided to take all of that energy and all of those resources and put them into rebuilding my life and my career, because that is something that he cannot take away ever, no matter what. There are no puppet strings attached to me, and that's priceless. No matter where you are in your battle, if you are finding your footing, if you have already rebuilt your life, or if you are completely dependent on your ex for support, I really, really encourage you to choose your battles wisely. Think strategically. You know, that support card is worth a lot. And where can you allow him to feel like he's winning so you can obtain what is most important, and that is your children. I have one client who has allowed her ex-husband to put on paper that they have 50-50 custody, and the reality is she has 80% and he has 20%, but she's accomplished her goal. She has 80% control over who her children are turning out to be. And during that 80% of the time, they are learning what unconditional love looks like, what a healthy environment looks like, and that again is priceless. One of my battles early on had to do with the added expenses outside of child support or spousal support, and that was the extracurricular activities, the medical costs, school activities, childcare, preschool, daycare, all of those things. And originally I was spending so much time keeping track of these things, dividing it up, sending him the receipts, trying to collect over and over again. After a period of time, the courts finally understood that this was someone who used those finances to control me. And so I asked the court to impute a monthly average that would be garnished from his wages based on the previous 12 months expenses and receipts to back that up. And so I turned it over to Child Support Services. The reality is he misses out on jobs or gets fired from jobs all the time. So do I actually collect that? No, but I took the energy that I was expending on that and I gave it to someone else because it just wasn't worth it for me. I know I've emphasized several times throughout this video that everyone is in a different place, and I really want that to be clear. There is absolutely no judgment. Everyone is walking a different path. I'm hoping to share my perspective because it could resonate with you, or it could get you to think outside of the box a little bit, or to look at things from a different angle, or to think more strategically. Zero judgment. And I guess the takeaway from this is to understand that money and finances are such a huge source of control for the narcissist, and truly a way that it's their big button. And so if you can distance yourself from that or take your power back in any way, that's truly the goal. Join us on my Facebook page. I have two different pages. One is One Mom's Battle, and I also have an author page, which is Tina Swithin. And we share lots of tips and advice in different categories related to divorce and custody battles with cluster B individuals. So join me next week and I will keep cheering you on.